Now, before the break, we spoke to Anika Abrahams, and we touched on what the patriarchy is, how that affects masculinity, and how to redefine masculinity as well. But we just touched on it. But now we're going to delve deeper into that conversation. Well, in studio, we have Usam Kilisiwe Tembu, who is a clinical psychologist who's working with SADC, which is the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and we will be also delving deep into this topic. So please help me welcome Usam Kilisiwe. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. And you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So before we get started, I just want to read you a little insert or a little fact that we got from our research that says, from the Department of Correctional Services, it shows that around 90%, 97% of inmates are male, and over 80% of them are from like violent crimes and gender-based violence as well as murder. So I want to ask, like, is South Africa facing a mental health crisis, or is it facing a masculinity crisis?
I think that's a very, very important deep question that you've just asked. And I think in order to answer that question, we actually need to look at the community as a whole.
Yes.
And although it's tempting to blame males and say it's a masculinity issue and males should be held more accountable, if you look at what it takes to raise a male, it's the community.
Yes.
And it's not only the missing father, that's often the case with a lot of South African families, but also the resentment that the mother carries when they raise the child. That also creates issues. And then other issues in the community that allow males to develop the way they do and not control their impulses and their toxic masculinity.
Yes. In those issues, would you also include like economic factors, like, for example, maybe the expectation that, or when they cannot meet that expectation of providing or protecting, could that be also an issue or a factor in that?
Definitely. As we all know, the male ego is very fragile. So when they cannot obtain sort of meaning or purpose, then that ego becomes quite derived by power and chasing power and finding things like belonging. That's why a lot of males will likely join a gang or participate in a criminal activity because of that sense of belonging and the male ego.
Yes, that is very understandable. Because it feels like, you know, when you can't find home somewhere else, or like in structures that are meant to help you become better, you kind of find home in different environments where it can then generate more issues along the line. So like I've said, you work at SADC. So I want to know, how does the group teach men that vulnerability is like not a weakness, especially in a society that still defines men by like how much they endure, like how we said, you know, they join gangs and they partake in violent things just to feel, not to show that vulnerability. So how can we and you at SADC teach the men that this vulnerability that they're feeling is not a weakness?
Yeah. I think what SADC has done is they've enrolled a lot of programs. They've also joined like CIPLA, the pharmaceutical company that's rolled out a lot of programs and conferences and talks that males can attend. And I think that as more people are saying that men should speak out, you know, the whole thing that men don't cry, people are starting to dispel those myths in society through NGOs and also through things that SADC is offering. It's becoming less and less stigmatized to embrace the part of being a man that's more sensitive rather than the toxic masculinity that we see.
That is a great answer. And I feel like you did give ways for them to seek counsel and seek like help. But for like example, like let's say for in some cultures, it embraces the norm to be like an aggressive or a strong man through aggression. Like how do we address these like cultural norms that like the therapy cannot fix by itself?
I think the problem there is there's a bit of a paradox because it's actually okay to be strong as a man and embrace your aggressive side to protect. You know, there's a reason why we like watching things like rugby where men use their strength to compete against each other and it can be entertaining and so on and so forth. But I think the problem lies when males start to use or over-rely on their masculinity to solve other problems where a little bit of softness or sensitivity should be coming in. And cultures that do embrace like a lot of patriarchy, a lot of chauvinism, are just focusing on one side of a man. And a man, there's a lot of parts to a man, not just those toxic
They're not
sides.
just the one toxic. There's also the emotional side that needs to be addressed and embraced. Not embraced as well. So with that, I want to ask, like, if we're really serious about healing these South African men, like where do we, like what is the first real step? So like, do we start with just the dads, or do we start in schools, or like, give me like an inclination of where would we start realistically in providing healing for these men?
If I was answering as a clinical psychologist, I'd say start with the children,
Yes.
because it's very difficult to change habits in males.
Mhm.
But we all know that it's the males and the parents that raise the children. So
Mm.
essentially, the difficult answer is to start everywhere.
Yes.
And that often can be difficult because there's actually a lot of work to do.
And that's understandable. It's actually, it actually makes me feel some like type of way, because it feels like you need to address it at the cause, which is the children.
Mm.
But how do we get through to the older generation to, um, l- that's the question I ask myself, but my question that I ask you is, what would you tell the older generation? Like, what would you tell them is the beginning steps to what real healing looks like for a man in South Africa?
It's actually a really good question, and I think it's a follow-up to the children thing that we've just spoke about, but maybe males should focus on their inner child.
Mm-hmm.
So focus on where their inner childhood wounds were, where growing up in an abusive home, maybe alcoholic mom, alcoholic father, and deal with what they would have liked to see in a father and become that father not only for their children, but also for themselves. So I think the inner child is maybe a theme all around, both for the ones that are old and the ones
And
that...
the ones that are still coming.
Yes.
So that's, thank you actually for saying that. And thank you for, well, firstly, I want to say thank you for being here and giving us your insight. And also thank you for showing the individuals as well as men that healing doesn't only start when you're young, preferably maybe when you're young, but that healing can happen at any point in your life and any point in your journey. So I want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us your insight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the discussion does not end here. After this, we'll just be touching on the topic that we had, as well as the resources that we've learned along the way. So let's go hop into that.